sometimes meeting people that do things that you couldn't necessarily imagine yourself ever doing can be intimidating. And it's no secret that I am heavily involved in WiCyS, Women in Cybersecurity, and supporting this initiative. And Lynn Dohm is the executive director of WiCyS. So when I chanced my arm and asked her would she be on the podcast, she said yes. I couldn't believe it. And I had to do a lot of work around getting over my own imposter syndrome, but she made it so easy to do that.
Really, I was thinking before I even got on this today, I was like, I know nothing about Lynn prior to WiCyS, Lynn. So I guess we can start there then and find out, like, where did you start, especially when it came to cybersecurity or tech roles anyway, and how did you end up as the executive director then from there? I imagine that's more than 2 or 3 years that you want to cover, but I'm sure it's an interesting story.
Oh, I love this story. I love this story. And it's one of those things that you don't know where it's going until you're in it. And then you really see the vision in the future. And you're like, wow, I'm onto something here. I'm on this journey and I'm on this path. And so how I got started was very simple. I started working as an individual contributor, as an independent consultant for a National Science Foundation. So here in the US, the National Science Foundation funds some cybersecurity grants. And so one of the originally funded cybersecurity grants was funded in the Chicagoland area. And I was here and applied for a position in that role. And I was hired as a contractor to be working on cybersecurity educational solutions and workforce initiatives and bring more individuals into the training program that they had. And so there was lots of different areas that I started focusing on in cybersecurity, but cybersecurity was immediately fascinating to me because it wasn't anything I was ever around and I didn't even know much about it. And so when I got into this position, I was like, I need to learn what cybersecurity is all about. Why are we doing this? And once you understand the important role and the mission focus and the curiosity and the problem solving and the troubleshooting and that those are just natural tendencies of mine already. I was fascinated, though, by observing the people that were in it and that were in these intense competitions and that were learning and growing in this space. I was fascinated by how hyper-focused they became.
Yeah.
And that's also my nature. I love going down the rabbit hole and continuing to research and learn more and keep at it. And so that was, as an observer looking at the cybersecurity professionals that I was working with, I just became really intrigued and interested in that. And then, of course, it's a very lucrative career and it has a lot of career advancements, so many different pathways, so many different career advancements, so many ways you could go. You could go technical, you could be non-technical. And it came about, we worked on one of the very first resources available for underrepresented individuals. And so we started putting together this toolkit for underrepresented individuals to get into cybersecurity. And it was really just pulling articles and resources and compiling it into all one space. It was very basic. But through that, I started learning about many different workforce initiatives. So we have to build up the cybersecurity workforce. What are we doing that's different? Why? How can we get more women and underrepresented individuals into the field? Because we're at this critical workforce shortage. And so we need more bodies. We need more people. And if we're tapped out with the people we already have, then we need to go into other different ways of gathering more attention into the cybersecurity workforce. So creating that accessibility and the opportunity it was really a place where I lied. And it was all about clear communication, breaking down what cybersecurity is, because cybersecurity, Jen, it's done a very good job of being confusing, convoluted, inaccessible. Everyone feels like it's out there somewhere. How could you ever get to it? No one's ever going to pay attention to it because it seems like it's just so hard to get there.
And you caught me there as like a nerve. You could hear me laugh when you said it first, because I'm always found ranting about humanizing tech, but humanizing cybersecurity. And that's now becoming humanizing AI as well. And it will be humanizing quantum computing, because if more than half of the population, which it are not working in tech and don't understand, but we're going to start introducing things like AI and, cybersecurity for everybody within all of those other fields, and they don't understand it or they're intimidated by it, then we might as well go and bang our head against the wall. Like, it needs to make sense. It needs to be simplified for everybody to understand. not the technology, but the language, like you say. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, humanizing it. Yeah, and making it real and accessible.
Yes.
And a part of our lives.
Yeah.
And so that's just the area that I stuck with, is that cybersecurity workforce initiatives and really bringing more individuals into it and creating inclusive spaces and creating the resources and the support structure and the opportunities for more folks to get involved. And through that very initial role that I had with the National Centers for System Security and Information Assurance, the CASIA Center, and through your work, Jen, with the Ensight Center, you might know Dr. John Sands. He was one of the original, he was one of my first mentors in cybersecurity, along with the late Eric Spangler. He was also the co-PI, the PI, the principal investigator for that particular grant. And so they were just my mentors in this space. And they really realized at that point that I had something, that other organizations should really have with them to help create more, pathways and more opportunities for others. And so through those guys really championing me, I received other roles in other organizations. So it led to not only grants, but then I started going into the nonprofit space and then in the for-profit space as well. And so it launched itself from that, just finding myself and getting my feet wet and feeling very grounded and confident in what the needs are for the cybersecurity workforce. Then I started working with many different grants, nonprofits, for-profits, which led to me to WiCyS. And that was around 2014 when I helped launch the original Community College Cyber Summit under the leadership of Dr. Bob Spear. And with that, WiCyS was forming around the same time, along with the International Consortium of Cybersecurity Minority Professionals, ICMCP, which is now Cybersecurity. And so it was like we were doing 3CS. They were, WiCyS was going on right here. I was interested in it. It was already booked. I called and they were like, no, we're already at full capacity. I was like, but wait, I need to be at that conference. So the very own WiCyS conference, I was denied even going to. And then there was, ICMCP going on at the same time. So it was this circle of great work being done in this space. And we collaborated with them all. And I was contracted originally at WiCyS into support capacity. And through that, I continued to get more and more work with the WiCyS organization. I had many, many other different clients as well. And in 2018, when WiCyS was finally here in Chicago, so 2 years prior to that, I was always invited to be at the very own conference that I was helping support, but I was already committed to other cybersecurity collegiate competitions and so on and so forth. So I was never able to make it. But when it was here in Chicago in 2018, the founder, Dr. Amberine Siraj, is like, you have no choice. You're going to this conference. And I went and it was life-changing. I mean, part of one of my keynotes is even sitting at the table and knowing at that very moment when I saw Dr. Siraj come onto the stage, and I knew at that moment when she was like, welcome to this global cyber sisterhood. And how she said that WiCyS is pronounced, our acronym WiCYS is pronounced WiCyS, like we sisters. I was like, this is what I've been searching for all along. Because prior to that moment, I really didn't feel like I had the camaraderie. I was an independent contributor. I was part of all these different organizations, but I didn't really have my strong people around me all the time. I was working remotely for all these years. Having an office here and there in certain locations, and I was seeking that. I was looking at all the different cybersecurity associations in the Chicagoland area, and I was going, and they're very lovely. I met some very incredible individuals. I'm still great friends with them, mentored me along the way, but I was missing that kind of rich conversation on cybersecurity and women and leadership and diverse talent, and I couldn't find it. But at WiCyS, it was right in front of me all along.
Yeah.
And
there's a different vibe, like, and I wonder, as you're talking though, it occurred to me, like, have you always noticed that there was, like you said, when you went into that research program or that position the first time around, were you already aware of the lack of women in both tech and in cyber? Or because I was, not that I wasn't aware of it, I was still of the mindset where it was not, I was the weirdo for being in it. It was not a girl's job as such. And that was right up until I attended my first Women in Tech anything. And then I kind of went, oh, so because it was always a nerdy thing that you just don't do. And I hadn't yet switched the mindset over, but I was well into my 30s at that stage before it even occurred to me that it was okay to do these things, which now when I look at people, I go, oh my God, I was so slow to figure that one out. But you, as you're talking, it sounds like you've had that from day dot.
Yeah. It was interesting because I did realize that there was something lacking here. And I even realized it in so many different awkward situations and scenarios. And it was very obvious that I was the only woman in a lot of cases. And then interacting on many different, training programs and competitions. And you're like, what this whole thing is lacking is diversity and other talented individuals really, breaking up this kind of groupthink mindset. And so it was interesting to observe. And I do think one of my qualities that has really helped elevate me throughout my career has always been to kick back and observe for a while and really become infused and a part of it. And I take that with everywhere I go. Even when I go to a different country, it's like I want to explore everything, but I want to take a day or two just to kick back and get the vibe of the culture before I go head into it.
Yeah.
I want to see, I want to sightsee everything, but I also want to understand the culture and before I'm going full force. And I feel like I've taken that into every role that I've had, is really trying to understand the culture and observe certain ways. And through that also helps any individual define their leadership style, because through those years, there was so much good that I saw, but there was also so much that I also saw that I would really make a mental note of, oh, okay, I got my number on that. And I know I'm a recipient of this behavior, but this is how I know I will never make anyone else feel.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it sticks with people more how people make you feel than anything else that they say. Absolutely, you don't forget it ever. I think no matter how old you are or what way you've gone in the world, you don't ever forget how people made you feel.
So I went to my first WiCyS conference in 2018, and my career really advanced from the network there. I mean, everything was going incredibly strong. And a year and a half later, I just received a little short, sweet message from Dr. Siraj asking me if I would consider applying for the executive director role. And what is interesting, too, is that I actually posted that role for others to apply to, and I never looked at it myself. It wasn't until she literally slapped me in the face with it. And I was like, oh, wow, I never even opened this role. Because you're so in the zone of who you think you are.
Yeah.
It takes another person to believe in you in a different capacity for you to see outside of yourself. And that perspective was life-changing. And that's why I share so much that she believed in me before I even believed in myself at that moment. And she continues to do that. The executive committee, Dr. Janelle Struck and Dr. Costas Trekis, they all continue to do that. And that's a never not needed characteristic of who you surround yourself around and who you surround yourself by. And so
you unlock a whole other level of capability of somebody if you do that. I had a lady in the last company I worked in. I remember she took me to one site about 4 or 5 years ago. I was working in support, and she said, we're going to open a role in engineering, to have a customer success engineer come in. And I was, what might you think about that? And I was like, oh, do you want me to recommend people? I can recommend people. And I went through a couple of people. She just kept staring at me. And I was like, when are you opening it? Am I missing something? What's happening here? And she still, because she couldn't ask me to apply for it. She was just letting me know it was coming. And then the more I kept talking and the more I kept she just kept staring blankly at me. And then eventually the penny dropped. And I was like, me? And it was absolutely the turning point for me with regards. That was where I went so that I could get into. I eventually ended up in a leadership role there, which just showed me a whole other side of what can be done in cybersecurity as well. And blew my mind. Would never have done it if she hadn't have given me that look and stared me in the face. So as you were talking about that, I'm like, I know exactly how that feels.
Yeah, and she stared at you long enough for you to be like, okay, what is going, like your thinking is like, I have to find, what am I missing here? Because the stare is continuing.
I thought I was just recommending the wrong people, that she's somebody in mind, and I was trying to go through the list to get to the right person. Oh my God, I was just not even sorted, because people don't approach you and think, here's an opportunity. Would you like a shot at it? It doesn't really happen until you've got a network like we have in WiCyS. Like, women are a whole different breed when it comes to that kind of thing. They're more inclined to introduce you to it. But for me, she was the first woman I had ever worked with. And that was only 4 or 5 years ago. So, it was a total eye opener for me that somebody would come to me and attempt to put an opportunity in front of me. Prior to that, I've had to seek them out, compete with somebody, dig the elbows in and go and find it. And do 150% of the work to get it. So I just didn't see it, because it doesn't happen like that. Not in my experience, not to me anyway. So I don't know if that's not to women, but definitely I hadn't seen it happen like that before. So
isn't it interesting too, how it's hard to be what you cannot see, but once you have that guidepost of a leader that you aspire to be and you admire, and that mentors you along the way, once you have that, how attainable and achievable that your drive could be, once you're focused on that, like, oh, okay, this is a pathway, and I'm on the pathway because I have that individual in front of me leading the way, and I see who she is as a leader, and I also aspire to be in that direction. And all of a sudden, your vision, everything that you focus on, really comes to light. Like, you really... it really comes together in
the
so
mindset
many
shift. Like, absolutely.
It does. And when we talk about the cybersecurity leaders and the roles and how it's hard to be what you cannot see, it really is. If you don't see a way up for yourself, and if you don't see diverse, talented individuals and women and underrepresented individuals in leadership roles, then you really don't feel like, oh, there's no way up here for me.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you feel like you're going to have to put people out of the way and really fight for where you want to be. And sometimes it's just...
Or become a masculine leader. You have to take on those masculine traits in order to be able to do it, which, if they're not part of your natural persona anyway, I have seen and met women over the years who have essentially changed, or they're completely different in work, and keeping those traditionally masculine traits or behaviors to keep their role, or to show, what I'm trying to say, to prove their status in work. But outside of work, that's not what they're like at all. Like, but that's what they've felt that they've had to do. I've definitely come across that before as well. Now, I haven't done it, much to the chagrin of some of the people around me, who don't understand this completely different approach to things. And it was always going to be completely different. As the first woman leader in my team. But yeah, I think we're getting to a point where you can bring authenticity to it now, but prior it wasn't as easy.
Yeah. And that authentic leadership style is really what the future generations need to. You and I were talking before this podcast started about that Gen Z and the Gen Alpha. I mean, how driven they are. They know exactly what they want. I mean, I have Gen Zs. My kids are all Gen Zs, and they know exactly what they want out of life and out of their careers. And that passion and that happiness is a driving factor, and how they want to be treated and how the culture that they want to be surrounded by. And they're not negotiating, they're not taking what some of the things that you are, like Gen Xers might have taken. Yes. And the millennials, really, I give a lot of credit to those millennials. They made a very good and they got a very bad rap. Like baby boomers and Gen Xers are always like, oh, those millennials. I was a Gen Xers, like, work hard, millennials. You're making my life easier. Like, those
they went against the curve. Like, they were the first ones to do it and go, no, I'm going to do it my own way. And the Gen Zs, like say, they've taught me about boundaries. I thought I knew about boundaries, but I've had my 15-year-old niece. I remember talking to her one day about working late or doing something voluntarily. And I was complaining about it because it took me longer than it was supposed to. And it wasn't for anything on the WiCyS side. Let me just say that first. It was for something for school or something like that. And she was like, but why would you do that? I was like, what do you mean, why would I do it? And she goes, but if you're not enjoying it and you're not getting paid for it, why are you doing it? And I found myself standing in a room going, oh, I don't know. because I'm supposed to. They were expecting me to. It's the right thing to do. And none of the answers were the right answer as I heard them leave my mouth. None of them were a good enough answer. Like, she was bang on when she asked me that question. And I still remember the physical moment of how she made me feel. And ever since then, I find that when I'm doing things, if I start to feel less passionate about them, or I start to feel like they're becoming not difficult to do, but they're a drain to do, then I have to assess whether I have the energy for it, or whether I'm still, interested in doing that thing or not, rather than continue to do it because I said I would, or because it's needed. And it's given me 10 times more energy, because now I'm only doing things that I feel passionate about and enthusiastic about, and I'm not out of duty. But it was a complete mindset shift, and I love it. I'm here for it. Like, even when sometimes I'm like, oh, shut up when they're talking, but when I stop for a minute and I think about it, I'm like, oh, you're right. I hate that you're right, but you're right. You teaches so many great lessons. Like, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And saying no is a really important thing. No can be a complete sentence. We don't have to follow it with anything else. Just not at this time. It's not a good fit for me at this time. Or, I also feel like I've cycled myself into really overworking myself in so many different ways, not with WiCyS, but in other careers and also in other volunteer areas. And when you do feel you're very dragged down or dreading the day and not really finding that love in that life for the moment, then you're not living into your authentic, genuine self. And it does create burnout and stress. And really, self-reflection is always a key of how are we, what are our goals? Where do we want to be? Where do we aspire to be? And what can we not do now that will, prohibit us of being our more powerful version of ourselves tomorrow?
Absolutely. I love that. I'm going to get that quoted somewhere and write it up, I think. Because I think and maybe it's me at my age, or, like, I'm 45, sometimes I need to actually physically remind myself of these things, because I think there's a tendency, whether it's as a mother or a partner or as a parent or as an employee, to just keep on keeping on, because when I was 13, I think, when I had my first job. Now it's not legal for anyone to work in Ireland anyway below the age of 16, and then they can only work a certain amount of hours a week. So they have to be 18 before they can work full time. Which is, I remember when I heard that come in first, I went, huh? But it makes perfect sense when you look at it now. Like, they're only babies still when I look at them. But it meant that when I went to work at 13, I was taught, like, be grateful you have a job. Doesn't matter what they say or how they behave or who's giving out to you, suck it up and get on with it. And that mentality stayed with me because I was taught it so young. And it took a while to break that out. The other side of it then too. And the world looks completely different when you do come out the other side of it and start to see it as you should, where your value is, like, totally different world. So I have a question around the growth of WiCyS. So it's been growing so fast. And I know only recently, even on your LinkedIn, you've just gone over 100,000 followers. I was watching that ticker so hard every day, going, when are they going to say it?
I know. We were watching it too. We knew, like, behind the scenes, we were seeing, like, oh, we're at 99,900, and we're like, oh my gosh, when are we going to get over 100,000? And we just went over 40,000 webinar subscribers, and that's a huge milestone. Yes. So we have now we have over 40,000 newsletter subscribers, over 40,000 webinar subscribers. Then in addition to that, we have close to 11,000 global members. We're in 103 countries. I just received that data come across my desk the other day. That is amazing. 71 professional affiliates, which you're leading the UK and Ireland affiliate. And then in addition to that, we have the 305 student chapters. So it's been really growing strong. And it's amazing to be a part of that growth, because when I first came on, we had this membership model that was already created. And we also had this strategic partnership model. And right now we have over 60 strategic partners. I think when I came on, there was like 9-10 strategic partners. And those are annual partners that continue to grow. They're this ecosystem. And so, but when I first came on, there was quite a period within WiCyS where there was this free membership. And so members, and in the very first year, not only did I get hit with COVID, like COVID hit, there was no book for leaders that, how do you lead an organization through a pandemic? They're like,
gosh, no.
everyone was equally as confused about that space. And so there was no moment for that. And then on top of it, there was this moment within the organization where we had this paid membership model, and it went into all the free members kind of, dropped within that year. And so and so we had to build up this whole incredible membership base. And what did that mean for us as an organization? And how are we going to move this forward? So it was really a defining moment on what are we going to do differently? What is going to set us apart? And how are we going to lead this organization into a scalable organization that is also sustainable? Because as a nonprofit, you're always balancing. How am I going to grow the staff to support the programming efforts, to support the community that we serve? And what does the community need? And does what we're doing for the community make sense and align to our employer partners? And how are we streamlining all this? So there's lots involved. You can't overfund a program if you can't support the staff to support the program. And
True.
So there's this, we've been coached along the way of also making sure that we don't go into this nonprofit starvation mode where you're not thinking about all the moving pieces to run an organization. And so the organization, is 6 years old, and it's growing really at such a strong capacity.
So during that time, then, what were the biggest challenges that you came across?
Well, every year is a new challenge.
I suppose COVID was certainly up there for sure. Although I found COVID, for me, as somebody who's outside of the States, it made that world smaller in a really fantastic way. Like, I built my WiCyS connections, and I built connections in lots of other groups that I would never physically have been able to get to, but because we're all on webinars and on Zoom, that's where the groundwork happened for me accidentally during COVID. And it was fantastic. Once we came out of it, then, it paid off. But beyond that, was that the biggest challenge, or was there others?
Well, there's been so many challenges along the way. There's a lot of social unrest, political injustice, or political unrest and social injustices. There's things that have come across, just around the world. The global changes that have happened and shifted have really been impactful to our community. And how are we going to show up and serve them? But I agree with you about the pandemic, that what it did for us is it kind of reduced our boundaries. We had this also mindset of in-person events, and we always wanted to be this international organization, but COVID unintentionally kind of launched us into this stratosphere. And so on March 12th through the 14th was when, in 2020, is when we were supposed to have our in-person event here in the States.
Right when it was closing everyone down,
Right in the thick of it. And on March 5th, that morning, I remember waking up and we met as an executive committee, and we're like, okay, COVID's in the States, but it's in California. It's never going to come to Colorado in a week. Like, we're good. Like, it's a lot of state, it'll have to take its time to make its way. And that was at 9:00 in the morning. We're like, we are dead on set. The WiCyS conference is going to happen on March 12th. And so we're moving forward full steam ahead. And by 3:00 in the afternoon, we had to make the tough choice of that conference is no longer sustainable. And it was one of the hardest days that I've ever had. And I know that all the people that have poured the last 18 months into building up a conference had to have, but it was out of our hands. There was nothing that we could do about it. But it really made us reflect on, well, what are we going to do now? We're here in this COVID state. And who are we if we're not an in-person event organization? And how are we going to continue to, and all the data on the women in the workforce during that time too. It was absolutely critical that we show up in a higher capacity. Everyone was even more dependent on us, not only for the roles and responsibilities at work that were changing for women, but also the responsibilities that they were also having outside of the work was just so hard on them. And so we wanted to show up differently. And so COVID made us reduce our own rigidness of boundaries and barriers. And we went to this international conference 5 weeks later. I think back now and I'm like, I don't even know how we
It
did
seems
it.
impossible, like, doesn't it? Yeah.
So we just worked around the clock. I mean, and then we're just so determined because I needed something to focus on that was positive, and working on a virtual conference, going international for an organization was exciting during such a time that was unknown. And so it happened, and that international growth just expanded. And UK and Ireland was launched around that time, like a year later, Bob. And it was so powerful because, and it took off full steam ahead. UK and Ireland, Australia, WiCyS India, they all launched at that time. And it was like incredible communities were being formed all over the place. And then international affiliates were partnering with affiliates in the state and holding virtual events. But isn't it interesting too, Jen, when I was always working in the virtual space, I had an office here and there in some locations, through the course of the past 2 decades, but always working virtually. But prior to COVID, I never had my camera on, nor was I in meetings where people had their camera on. And then all of a sudden COVID happened. And I'll never forget meeting with an individual on a partnership with LinkedIn. And that individual always came on the screen with their camera on. And I thought, oh my gosh, am I to do this now?
That's how I got this giraffe in the background, like when during COVID and we're all at home and we were told, look, we want to see each other, we need that kind of human interaction, so everyone was being asked to put their cameras on. And I bought that picture because I was so uncomfortable with turning on the camera. I said, if I put a really colorful picture in the background, people will look at that. They're not going to be looking at me, and I can relax a bit. Then I don't have to stress about it. And I don't think there was really that many filters on all of the meetings at that point then either. Once they introduced filters, it was like, okay, I don't mind so much now. I look like a supermodel. But I haven't been able to take the giraffe down. It fell off my wall once and I got asked for the next 2 or 3 days, where's the giraffe? Everyone had become so accustomed to it. So it's wherever I go, and anyway, when I decorate this room or move to any other room, it's going to have to stay. It's become the personality in my pictures as such. That's exactly the reason it's there. I was so uncomfortable with the idea, like dreading having to turn it on. And now look at us, people are making their dinner with the camera on while, on calls and stuff. They don't care anymore because we want to feel like we're in the room with them. And it broke that barrier, and that was fantastic.
It did. And it kind of level set that conversation too with men. When I was in so many meetings, like the roles and responsibilities in the home life really shifted. And so prior to that myself, I always separated a very clean boundary of Lynn Dohm, the professional Lynn Dohm. Like I never talked my kids, my mom, my family that I caretake for. That wasn't a part of my day to day. And then all of a sudden I'm in these meetings with, executives that are men, and their kids are running around the background, or they're throwing a ball for their dog. Yeah. And they're just as balancing their life just as much as I was. And it kind of brought everything down to a reality where we level set the playing field there a little bit. And I felt like very grounded and relieved in that moment that I could show up as a better version of my authentic self through the experience too. And I hope that other people have experienced those positive aspects as well.
It's so liberating to see it. Like I remember the moment where always thinking when I went into leadership that I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm never going to figure this out. You never really get a chance like you do as an individual contributor where somebody says to you, great job, or you've measured, at this % of achievement or whatever you've done. Like it's easier to measure, but as a leader, not always so much you're measured on your team's performance, but not necessarily their individual development. Not everybody does that. But I remember one of the guys that was on my team, and he was from the Maryland side, had to deliver training to the rest of the engineers across EMEA. And he had gotten up, and his wife was sick, I think, and she was a nurse. She had to go back to bed. And here he was with the baby strapped to his chest, and the baby was facing the camera. And the whole time he delivered the entire training session with the baby facing the camera. I'd say the first 20 minutes, none of us heard any of what he said because we were too busy cooing over the baby. And every now and again, he'd switch from one toy to the next and shake it in front of him the minute the child would start sort of scooching a bit or spot that people were looking at it. And I remember just sitting there thinking, like, this is the moment for me. This is the moment where everything changes because A, he felt comfortable doing that, and B, nobody out of those, whatever it was about 70 or 80 people on the call, nobody questioned it. Nobody asked their boss because their boss would have said it to me. Nobody questioned why that baby was on the call or, should it happen? Nobody wants for a minute. And I just thought, this is it. It was a complete, it was a big moment as such. And I have a picture of it still. And every now and again I look at it and I go, that was it. That was the moment.
It was the moment. And those moments are changing career trajectories because those lines were removed. We didn't have to have that clear distinction.
Exactly. And even as a leader, you can't, I think in order to help lead your team and help them be the best that they can be, it doesn't extend only to how they can be the best that they can be in work. If you're asking them to segregate those two things, it's not healthy for starters. But I mean, you're not going to tell them how to be a good wife or husband or parent. But if you're helping them be a better person, then it benefits everywhere. And if you know that they have children, then, there's other things you're making an account for if they're tired in the morning or if they've got a different opinion on things, or that they love their dog, or that they're into sports. Like, we would never have necessarily asked. There's roles in companies that I've worked in where we wouldn't have known those things about the people that we work with. You come in, you do your job, you get out, and I think it brings a whole other level of appreciation for the individual, but also as a leader, it helps to find different ways of relating to people. And I love it. It's like a big puzzle, trying to figure out what worked for this one, what works for this one. And, it's so much more satisfying. Anyway, I wander off topic again. We
love it. We love it. That's what makes you, is we love conversation and where it lends itself.
Yeah. When it comes to cybersecurity, it's a real difficult industry for people to break into, or at least it's perceived to be that way, especially if people are new to it. So on the WiCyS side of things, what are you finding is the most effective strategy, or what have you used so far that have been the most effective strategies to support women into those careers, or even advancing within those careers if they're already in there?
Yeah. So, I mean, what we really found is the entire, everything, the community-based effort, the network, that growing and learning space is really vital and important, but it's all the wraparound services too. And so when it comes to us, when we're looking at building out a programming effort, we're women in cybersecurity. We have this very large organization. We're all around the world. And then we also have areas of communities like UK and Ireland, like WiCyS Chicago, LGBTQ plus Pride, neurodiversity, cybersecurity. We have all these different areas. It's always about building a community, like-minded individuals, conclusive spaces, like really just being, having everyone find their people and their place and their footing and their grounding in the area. And then in addition to that, it's the wraparound services that really make a difference. So when we launch a programming efforts, whether it's for early, mid, or senior professionals, it's about how are we supporting them in this journey? Is it about offering a free certification? Because anyone could get a free certification offered to them. But how can they finish it? Because at the end of the day, we're working full time, and then we want to advance our education and knowledge. And we know that we're doing that in the evening, very likely already caretaking for our families in some capacity, men, women, non-binary individuals. Allies and advocates, we're all doing something outside of our workday that is, working for others, or taking care of our homes, or taking care of the things that we need, and then trying to level ourselves up in the careers. It could get hard and rough.
Yeah.
And so what are we doing to be able to support that? And what we found is that mentoring is really critical. The technical mentors for our more technical programming efforts. And then in addition to that, the career services and placement, it's always been a part of that. But the mentoring, the network, the camaraderie, the cohort, we always bring in everyone into this shared space of learning and growing together. So if Jen and Lynn were in a cohort together of 250 people, would be on Slack channels together, would be, championing one another. And really our program directors are there to champion the work and to make sure, like, looking at everyone's data and being like, okay, I'm seeing so-and-so is slacking about 2 weeks behind. Something must be going on in their life. And so I'm going to reach out and say, hey, what's going on? How could we support you? And then oftentimes we'll find that there is something very challenging going on behind the scenes that's caused them. And they do need an extra week to be able to catch up to others, or they do need a weekend of support or extra mentoring in the evening to be able to bring them up to speed, and that we're here for it. And so it is about just knowing that everyone learns at a different pace, and everyone, everyone has different experiences and how they advance in their career, and really just understanding what their needs are in the support that's necessary for them for career advancement, and then doing the best we can to provide it. We can't provide everything. We're a nonprofit organization. We do so many different programming efforts. Last year, our annual report's not public yet. I'm still doing the final review, which is what I'm actually doing after recording this podcast. But our fiscal year 24 annual report is going to be published within a week or so. And I believe the data show that we had over 101 or over 100. I know that's without having the report in front of me, it was over 100 programming efforts that served over 40,000 individuals in varied capacities, throughout the programming efforts. So that's a lot of programs, and that's a lot of ways of support that we have to work and make sure that we could do that for others. So, but what we've found too is that our security training scholarship, that's a very signature program. It's finding the hidden talent. It's taking individuals that's never even heard of cybersecurity, but are looking for what careers for me. It's looking at single moms when they're thinking about, how am I going to support this family? What can I do to support this family? And how am I going to get there? What kind of difference am I going to make in the world? Those individuals that really have that grit and that determination to get into a career that showcases lucrative career advancement opportunities, where we know that once they're into it, that they'll be able to have that eventually have more financial freedom, and be able to make better choices for themselves and their families. And that's what we're looking at, and creating career pathways. And it's taking individuals that finding the hidden talent, and taking those that really have that aptitude and that determination and that try again, and creating them to go into more advanced SANS certifications and then career placement services. And so far, that program in the past 4 years, our data is outstanding. It's off the charts. I mean, we had 100% career placement services within 12 months of starting the program. So these are individuals that are like, hairdressers and musicians that are looking for stay-at-home moms. And we had, one individual is a stay-at-home mom for 16 years. She didn't even know what cybersecurity was until she saw it come across her LinkedIn profile. And that's another thing, how important it is for us to be able to all collectively amplify the message of WiCyS, because we have so many different opportunities. We are literally funded by so many organizations in order to create these opportunities, but we're not going to reach other people that might need it unless the message is amplified. And so how everyone continues to amplify the messaging is so important. And it's very special for us to see, but that's how we get individuals into our program and create these life-changing experiences. One of my favorite stories is this young woman. She keynoted at an event this summer that I got a chance to finally meet her in person. And she was on the main stage talking about how she was sitting there with a newborn. She was going to go back to work from her maternity leave. And prior to going back, she realized, or she got the notification that that child was no longer available. And she was thinking, how am I going to do this? I'm a single mom. I have a baby, and I have to support this family. And the windshield on her car was cracked, and she was driving around with a cracked windshield, not being able to even try to make ends meet at that point. You just feel so much. At that moment, I could only imagine despair and just confusion and stress and frustration. And through the course, she was able to come across WiCyS programming efforts and the community and all the different opportunities, and through many other initiatives as well. And within like 2 years, she was taking her family on vacation. Like, these are the life-changing experiences that we want. But we're not only early career, we're also mid-career. And you're going to see in 2025 and beyond that really strong. We're looking at the baby boomers retiring. We're already forecasting, the youngest of the baby boomers is going to be 65 in 2030. That means that we have, come a month from now, we have 5 more years to think about how are we setting our mid-career individuals, our women, up for success for those senior positions. Because those positions are going to be opening up, and we want to make sure that we have
ready to rock.
that we're ready to rock, because it's only going to continue to trailblaze the way for more innovation, more creativity, and more women in leadership.
I love that. And I could listen to those individual stories all day. And I was at the conference this year and it blew my mind. Everyone had a story. Like, nobody tripped and fell into that conference, that's for sure. Everybody that was there was driven by, in most cases, people that they wanted to meet, that they'd met. Like, for me, it was my first physical conference, but I had so many people that were attending it that I had met and been connected to and interacted with so much over all of the previous years. When I went in, it was just like meeting all your sisters. Do you know what I mean? It was fantastic. And then hearing everybody's story and the speakers, and it was too short, Lynn. It was too short.
Well, I hope you're here next year with us. Yeah.
You mentioned there about things like, your sponsors and your funding and stuff. And there's more scrutiny coming upon like the DIB initiatives these days. We're hearing about funding getting cut for different groups, and our companies retiring those initiatives as that they don't need them anymore. Like, is there advice that you would give to any of the organizations that want to continue to make changes and support those underrepresented groups in the face of that?
Yeah, the scrutiny and the DEIB backlash that's happening right now, it's really interesting for us. This is an unusual space. This is very new that this is going on within the industry. And so, but, WiCyS has always been set up as a cybersecurity workforce initiative. We exist because there is a critical workforce shortage, and we invest in the most valuable and expensive asset in cybersecurity. And you're not going to have cybersecurity in your company if you don't invest in your people, because the people are the most important asset right there. And so, so we sit this very critical space on if companies want the workforce that they need in 5 years from now, then investing in organizations like WiCyS is what's going to continue to create the individuals in careers in cybersecurity. And then also, it's a security risk not to have the diverse perspective that women are bringing forward. And you cannot have a team of all the same like-minded individuals. It's going to create an invulnerability, or they're going to create an illusion of invulnerability. Yeah. And so, you definitely need all different talent on teams in order to make it the highest effective team itself. But for us, we're seeing companies really lean into it, and we're seeing companies pull out from having DEI. We're reading about it in the paper. We're not necessarily receiving that information from the WiCyS support perspective because of how important it is for our role to be here to be able to build up the workforce. I mean, the workforce the companies are only going to need more of it. And we need to lean in even harder. But it's an uncomfortable conversation to read about and hear about and to be a part, because when you're looking at this upcoming acronym, everyone loves acronyms, but the upcoming acronym of MEI, which is Merit, Excellence, and Intelligence, which is what some say, okay, I'm going to only advance the individuals that have the merit, the excellence, and the intelligence for that position. Well, naturally, what you're going to see is people are only going to be advanced that look like you, that act like you, because that's a bias that everyone has. And what DEI initiatives do is they create the ability and the pause to pay attention and to be able to look at things differently and looking at career advancement opportunities for diverse individuals and offering diverse perspectives to that process. And when that's stripped away, you're concerned about how the teams are being built and why they're being built. I mean, there's studies after studies that show that when someone looks like you and talks like you and have the same actions as you, that you will automatically perceive them as to be smart, competent, and trustworthy. And that's just a bias that we have. And it's important for us to be consciously aware and do intentional actions of what are we going to do differently that's the best for building the teams to protect our organizations. And so there's where my heavy concern lies when we have such strong leaders that are like, MEI. Well, I'm not buying it. And our data is showing that it's not working. It's not. It's because we're looking at what we've studied on women in cybersecurity, our WiCyS members are killing it out there. They're outperforming other participants in all 7 NICE categories out of 17 of the 20 NICE specialty areas as cybersecurity practitioners. But what's concerning to us is that when we do studies like this and when we do these different type of tests on how WiCyS members are performing as cybersecurity practitioners, when we do that, individuals will come in and self-identify in more junior roles, but their actual hard skills performance is at more mid to senior capabilities.
Yeah.
So it should be skills-based advancement and the skills and the talent that they have for that need. And when we get to that place and when our data shows that that's being done, that's when I will be convinced to think differently.
Yeah, I think you can see, I feel like we're on the edge of a cliff now with regards those who are continuing to invest is probably the wrong word, but continue to support and nurture diverse teams, and those who are moving away from it, either because they think the job is done or it's a nice to have or whatever the reasons are. The success of those companies, I think we're on at that very cliff edge point at which one of them is going to succeed and move forward quickly and achieve really well, and the other one's going to wonder why they're not able to keep up. And I think that's going to become really apparent over the next even 2 to 5 years. And they'll, I do genuinely think after 5 years, the ones that aren't succeeding will be going, what are we doing wrong? Like, I don't understand. But
because there's no one else, they have no alternative opinion to be like, hey, you, look what you've done different. That's not making sense.
Exactly. Yeah. We can't go back in time. Like, we can't go back and make all of the consumers out there behave like consumers in the 1950s behaved or in the 1970s behaved. They don't. The things they're buying are not the same. The way they buy is not the same. And the reasons for buying are not the same. And at the end of the day, everybody's pitching to somebody who's buying something, but they're not making enough effort to learn about their reasons or needs and things like that then too. Because like we talked earlier, like your Gen Zs, and definitely like the Gen Alphas as well, they're buying into projects, and they're making purchases based on their belief systems as such, rather than having the shiniest, nicest, biggest, fanciest car, or they'd rather buy one that's electric or that it's better for sustainability or so. It's as simple as that. And it's funny when I feel it looks glaringly obvious, but I get so frustrated when I see the articles, like you say, where there's companies moving against it. And I just think it's I don't think they see how bad the PR is as such on that side to people who are capable of bringing their business forward. But we'll see. We'll give it those 5 years and see.
Yeah. It's taking back and being curious. Continue the curiosity will still drive us forward, right? We'll observe, we'll be curious. Yes. And then, and hopefully those type of companies are doing their due diligence and reading the data and reading the materials and keeping an eye on it, and also going to WiCyS and reading our data. We have the State of Inclusion Benchmark Report. We have the N2K Cyber Talent Study. If anyone's really interested in what is the data showing and saying,
it's all there.
Use these as tools to help you make decisions. Absolutely.
So before we let you go today, what do you see for the future then for WiCyS and cybersecurity? Is there anything coming up, bearing in mind that it'll be February before this final hit, so it'll be right before the conference, but what do you foresee for the future of WiCyS?
Well, for the future of WiCyS is we're really looking at what is our 5-year strategy. We have 6 years in as a nonprofit, 5 years before that as a conference only. So the growth has happened very grassroots at the very beginning. It's just a very small funded conference. $70,000 is, the first funded conference. And then the conference grew, but we weren't seeing the reflection in the workforce. Then we became a nonprofit. And now, because of our work and many other nonprofits' hard work, we're seeing, the reflection in the workforce. So for us, for our next 5 years, we're really looking at, in that mid-career, again, how are we setting up the success? We're looking at what's going to be happening in the next 5 years. And the baby boomers was a very large generation. And it's not to say that baby boomers are all going to retire when they're 65, but we better darn well prepare for that. because that's a large generation. Those are individuals that have a very large chunk of either the technical experience or the leadership experience. And, you and I we talked about that, seeing our way up. And it's really important for us to set up our WiCyS members for success in that space. So if they're not already in mid-career, getting them in mid-career and then getting them ready for more senior positions. And so we're really going to see two tracks coming out of WiCyS for mid-career individuals is if they want to stay as individual contributors in their technical advancement space, how can we support them with their career advancement in that location, and also ensure that they're advancing in their career, their titles are advancing, and that their pay continues to advance as well. And then for those that choose and want to be managers and leaders, to be able to ensure that we're setting them up for success so that they could elevate and rise in their career. And so that's the area where we're really focusing on. And then, of course, the intersection and integration of AI and everything that's important about the humanizing. We're humanizing everything, and we need to also get our WiCyS members ready for the growth in that space. And I mean, the growth that's so remarkably tremendous that has already happened. And it happened in a blink of an eye. I think I was part of a conference, and I don't know the exact data, but they were saying it was 20-something years for people to adopt the internet. It was 20-something more years or additional years to that for people to adopt, the use of the cell phone, the way that we've adopted it. But with AI, it was like 3 months in order to hit those markers. So it's really important that we're looking at that very closely and paying attention to that integration and the phenomenon that's occurring, and how are we supporting everyone along the way.
It's definitely going to keep you on your toes anyway, I'd say.
Sure. It's derailed us in many ways. It keeps us on our toes. And it's fabulous. And also, AI is something else. It brings out all the emotions.
True. And we have to get the grip on it so that we can help everybody else feel comfortable with it then as well. So the pace, I love the pace. I love it when it's super fast like that. But at some point, it's going to feel unbearably fast. So I think we're ready. Yeah. We're ready for that.
Yes,
thank you so much, Lynn. I do appreciate you taking the time out today. It's been great fun.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I always love our conversations together. So this has been a beautiful start to my day.